it didn't occur to me, as you said, to go, okay, really, really, God, why this? Why now? That wasn't my first reaction. My first reaction was like, how are we going to do this? For me, it was more of why not us? Why do bad things happen to good people? We all ask that question all the time.
Mhm.
And none of us, we won't get that answer, I don't think, on this side. I just looked to him to show me how to do this. That was my constant prayer was, you have to show me how to do. I have no idea how to do this. I have never helped anybody die. I don't know how to do this. I never entered my mind I was going to have to raise my two boys. You are going to have to show me every single day, every single minute of every day how to do this because I don't know. I don't know how to do this, but I know that you are going to help me do this. And he did.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Holy Wreckage. Today, I am here with Rachel Schneider, and she is the author of The Widow Chose Red memoir. Her wreckage is walking with her husband through ALS. And I just want to give a warm welcome to Rachel. Thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to your sharing your story because I know that there's thousands of other people walking that same journey
Mm.
that you did. I know that they're going to find support and encouragement through you. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Crystal. It is a pleasure and an honor to be able to be here with you today and to share with you and your listeners. I'll start by explaining what ALS is because I didn't know what it was when my husband was diagnosed 17 years ago with it. And it is called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And that's a mouthful. So,
Yeah.
of course, ALS, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And what ALS is, it's a motor neuron disease that actually kills the motor neurons that are in the body. And what are the motor neurons? They are the messengers that take the messages from the brain to the muscles. So they are what makes the muscles move. And with ALS, these motor neurons start to die. And so what that means in layman's terms is that the body starts to self paralyze and you can't move your muscles. So imagine having an itch at the end of your nose. Your brain, you can feel it. You know that it's there, but you cannot lift your arm or get your finger to your nose to scratch that itch. And that's what ALS is. Your mind stays completely strong and intact while the rest of your body weakens and stops working. And then ultimately, because your diaphragm is a muscle that moves your lungs and causes them to breathe, it stops working. So it's progressive and it is terminal. There are about 30,000 people currently in the United States that are living with it. There will be between 5 and 6,000 people that will be diagnosed and that will get the news this year. The timeline is between 2 to 5 years. There is no known cure and there is no known cause at this point. So there are two strains of it. One is familial, meaning that there is a gene within a family. So there are some families that are more predisposed to this disease than others. And from the science, we know that because it is one of the motor neuron diseases, along with the family of Huntington's and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they are hopeful that if they can unlock some kind of a cure for one of these, that it might be helpful for determining how they might be able to, arrest or cure or stop. Uh,
Wow. Wow. First, I want to say I'm so sorry that your
mm,
family had to endure this.
Thank
And
you.
second, as you're explaining this, the first word that comes to mind is terrifying.
Mm,
And the second thought is why would God allow such a thing to exist? And maybe that's sort of a rhetorical question. I know you don't have the answer for that, but I'm
Right.
sure that you've asked that. Maybe you haven't, but I probably would have. Like, Lord, why is this even a thing?
Mm.
But I'd love to hear how you guys worked through that. Like, what was life like before you found this out?
So John and I had been married for 21 years before his diagnosis. We actually had been introduced by his mom. She's the third word in my book. I met Elaine because she has
Oh.
been pivotal in our whole relationship. So I met John through her. And I love her to pieces. She's still alive, 88 years young, and John and I were introduced through her. He was working for a company that put him in a program that took him all over the country. So we met while he was in Dallas and he was moved to Philadelphia, and we dated long distance for about a year. And then finally, I had started my own business here in Dallas, and I just kind of knew that we kind of needed to either make a decision we were going to go forward or not. And he said, I'm going to ask you to marry me. He did. And then we got married here and I moved to Philadelphia. And shortly after that, we were in Seattle and then to San Francisco and then back to Dallas and then to Chicago and then back to Dallas and then to Minneapolis. And we did all of those moves in the course of I think it was about 14 years. We moved about 7 times. So the boys were born in Chicago. And then, we came back to Dallas for a short period of time and then Minnesota. So the boys really grew up in Minnesota. And John had the biggest job of his career in Minnesota. And we were just living that life. We had a great community. We had found a super church that we really, really enjoyed and connected with. He had the job of his dreams, and I was working a business at home. I was in direct sales and taking care of the boys, and life was great. Our families were doing fine. My parents live in Australia. His parents were in California, so we didn't really have them close by, but we always knew that they were available if we needed them. So I would say that our life looked pretty good. We hadn't really dealt with anything major in terms of illness or death. His brother had passed, unfortunately, a couple of years. I guess he was about 40 when Ronald died. And that was also an incurable illness of which he died from, which was AIDS. And so we had dealt with that. But other than that, we hadn't had much experience with anybody having any major illness or any major sickness. So when John started to notice that his left foot was dropping, he kind of thought it was maybe due to an old sports injury. He'd played a lot of sports in high school and college. So he wasn't really that concerned, except after about 6 months, it wasn't getting any better. So he started seeing a neurologist, unbeknownst to me. And after about a year, it was time for him to go and get his executive physical at the Mayo Clinic, which is like the mothership of all medicine. And he went there with the file that the neurologist had given him. And it was there that they checked him out and confirmed what this neurologist thought. And ALS is a disease that no doctor wants to give you that diagnosis and nobody wants to get it. They go through a pretty intense testing to rule out all kinds of other diseases because once they give you this news, your life is changed forever, completely.
So you said unbeknownst to you, did he
Mhm.
not want to worry you or it's just like a guy thing?
I think probably Crystal, probably part of both, a little bit of both. I don't think he really the doctors weren't sure what it was while they just, it was kind of like, let's just keep watching it. Let's kind of see what happens. But John obviously was concerned enough about it to go and see someone. And I think that the thing about ALS is just one of those things that it doesn't come to mind because the community is still very, very small. And if you look at it, like Alzheimer's has about 9 million people that are affected with Alzheimer's, which is horrible. The
Yeah.
ALS community is only about 30,000. So that's why you just don't hear a lot about it because the community is so small and nobody survives it. I think Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist, is probably one of the most notable who was diagnosed young with ALS and lived for quite a while, but he was completely dependent upon a care team that, took care of him 24/7. He had a feeding tube, he had a breathing tube. He could communicate through the eye gaze machine, which he did very, very effectively. But you have to kind of look at what you want your quality of life to be, what you and your family can manage. And this is one of those diseases that it really is all consuming for the people that are taking care of their loved one.
Yeah. So when he got this diagnosis and you heard, were you with him?
I was when we got the confirmation at Mayo.
Okay.
He had come home from Mayo and said, "You have to go back with me the next day because they think I have this illness." And he had come home that night very unexpectedly. The boys were already in bed. I was in bed reading, and he was just as white as a ghost when he walked in and just said, I think I'm Rachel, I'm going to die." And I said, "Wait a second, honey, calm down." He's like, "No, they think I have this disease. They think I have ALS." And I go, "What is that?" He said, "It's Lou Gehrig's disease." I go, "I don't know what that is either."
Mhm.
John, just calm down. And I knew because he was just not prone to over exaggeration. He was just kind of that, silent stoic type that I knew something was wrong, but I was just like, this cannot be right. I've never heard of this. This cannot be right. Okay, we'll go tomorrow and we'll get this all straightened out. And that was kind of where my head was for that night. And then the next day, so we went back up there. They started the testing, and within 2 days, they confirmed the diagnosis. And we were just broken. I mean, talk about wrecked.
Yeah.
That'll do it. And I just you just go into shock. And all of us, Crystal, have had or will have these moments in our life that will completely take our breath away. And some of them will do it out of happiness and joy, and others will do it because we've just been punched in the gut and we literally just can't breathe. So we both just were trying to figure out how to even process this. And they call it anticipatory grief. I didn't know what it was at the time, but like the name says, you start to grieve the life that you are not going to have.
Hmm.
And I think that's what hit us both fast and furious, was that we knew life would change and we were not going to grow old together. He was not going to see his boys grow up. It would take a miracle to heal him. And we just knew that that was a possibility, but things were not going to go. Our happily ever after was not going to be what we thought it was.
Hmm. I'm so sorry. So you get the news. You're already a believer. You're
Mhm.
strong in your faith at this point. So I'm
Absolutely.
assuming that you're praying, in those couple of days before you actually get the confirmation. You're praying, Lord, if there's any way that this cannot be, please make that happen. And it still happens.
Mhm.
So walk me through what that was like for your faith. Like, Were you shaking your fist at God? Were you like, "No, God's got us"? Just how did you handle that?
Well, I grew up in a very faith-filled family. Although my parents had 2 very different faith practices, and because my mom was born in Kiev, the Ukraine, and she grew up in a displaced persons camp in Germany for 13 years. And my father
Mm.
grew up in the deep south. And so they came from very different faith backgrounds. But one of the things that they did very well with their 4 children was they put the word in us. And we had a very strong awareness of who God was in our life, who Jesus was. The Holy Spirit, probably not quite so much, a little more of a mystery, but we were, on our knees every night praying our prayers with our family. So I had a very strong foundation. And as I mentioned earlier, I hadn't had a lot of experience with illness, with death, with a lot of what do I want to say? With a lot of bad experiences, right? So
Hardships.
so yeah, hardships, exactly. And so I didn't have any it didn't occur to me, as you said, to go, okay, really, really, God, why this? Why now? That wasn't my first reaction. My first reaction was like, what do I how are we going to do this? Um the why didn't really for me, it was more of why not us? Why not
Mm.
us? And so I think that was more of my why do bad things happen to good people? We all ask that question all the time.
Mhm.
And none of us we won't get that answer, I don't think, on this side. But it makes me think about Job, right? And most of us know the story about
Yeah.
Job and how and how he was tested and how God allowed that to happen. And he watched as the devil took everything but Job's life. He took everything from him. And the devil was just waiting for Job to renounce his God. And he just wouldn't do it. So I probably leaned more on that side than I did going, why is this happening to us? I don't I don't operate from that place, Crystal. I don't believe that God runs around and says, okay, you're going to be sick today, or you're going to get this. I don't believe that's the way that he operates. That's my own personal opinion. Um, I do believe that he allows us to be tested and he allows us to be strengthened and it's usually for our own good. And I think about too, especially since we're taping this on on the day before Easter, right? We
Mhm.
think about Jesus suffered, right? And what he went through, knowing full well who he was and and why God allowed that, right? And why Jesus made the decision to even go to do it.
Mm.
And it wasn't easy for him either that night in the garden praying, sweating blood, saying, "Do I really? Okay, I will do this. If you this is what you want me to do." So all of that, I think, was probably shaped more of my perspective than being mad at God. I just looked to him to show me how to do this. That was my constant prayer was, you have to show me how to do. I have no idea how to do this. I have never helped anybody die. I don't know how to do this. I never entered my mind I was going to have to raise my 2 boys. You are going to have to show me every single day, every single minute of every day how to do this because I don't know. I don't know how to do this, but I know that you are going to help me do this. And he did. He
That's so beautiful. Why not us?
did.
You know? Wow. That's such a testament to your faith. Many people would not, that wouldn't be the first thing that came to their mind. But I'm so glad that you shared that because anybody that's listening that would be going through something like this, that is the posture to have. That is the posture because just like you said, Job, like this could be a test for them.
Mm,
And not
mhm.
a test like pass or fail, but a test of, are you going to trust me with this?
Yeah. And and I think, Crystal, we all will get to that place where we won't have an answer. We're at the end of our rope, right? We're literally, we don't have the answer. We can't compute it in our brain. It doesn't make any sense. And there's we don't have it. And it's not going to. That's the thing. It's not going to, right?
Hmm.
You know, and I'm never going to know why John got ALS. We could have spent our whole 3 years trying to figure that out. Why? No, it happened, and so I think that for us, we just had this shift, this immediate shift that it's like, what is really, truly important. And I think that's the way sometimes, we often talk about, sometimes we just forget when our life is going along so well. We forget to give God the glory then, right?
Hmm.
We forget because things are, and we think that for some, yeah, oh yeah, we're our life, yeah. And even, those, and we all go through those phases in our life. I was one of those people too. I mean, I recognize God for what he was doing and thank you, Lord. And it's a great day. But yeah, but man, when you get to that place where your heart is so broken and you literally can't think straight, don't even know how to take your next breath. I mean, that's when you can feel too the power of the Holy Spirit and just really recognize that there is some force inside of you that is working together with God the Father and God the Son and getting you through this unimaginable circumstance. And I know for me, having gone through this, that my gratitude factor is off the charts. I am I'm so grateful to wake up in the morning, every morning, because what I know on a cellular level is that not everybody's going to wake up today and not everybody's going to finish the day.
Mm.
And when you really have integrated that into your life, your ability to be thankful just just goes through the roof. And this all got highlighted because of, there were days when I was just thankful John was still alive. I was thankful that John could we could get the medicine through the feeding tube. I was thankful that the hospice nurse came. I mean, that's where you just get to that place where you're just so grateful for every little thing that you just know that you just know that he is with you through every little thing and every big thing. But it's those little moments, I think, that just sometimes have a way of just searing into your heart and into your soul.
Mm. That's so beautiful. I know exactly what you mean.
Okay,
So,
good.
he gets the diagnosis.
Yes.
What's life like now?
Okay, so it's kind of like a blur. John and I, like I said earlier, my parents and two of my brothers were living in Australia. His mom and dad were divorced on the West Coast. We we made a decision not to tell our boys. Now, this happened in November of 2011. And so what happened 3 weeks later was my husband was let go from his job, that big, beautiful job that he loved so much and was so good at. They didn't know he was ill. They were just making changes. And John had been busy letting a lot of people go. It was right before the holidays. It was horribly stressful. He was carrying this news with him, but then he got the word that he was let go. And we were scheduled to go to California to see his family for Christmas. And it wasn't unusual for me to go out ahead of the kids, which I did. John got there, and of course, everybody knew it was going to be a different kind of Christmas because John was unemployed. And they all thought that was the biggest thing that we had to worry about. And of course, we knew better. We had told my parents because they lived on the other side of the world, and we knew that they weren't gonna be able to tell anybody that was in our part of the country, and so because we still didn't want the boys to know. John wasn't falling down. You really didn't know anything was wrong with him right away unless you really watched the way that he was walking, and it wasn't that noticeable if you didn't know, because ALS has a very slow progression, and people can often have it for up to a year before, or 2 or 3 before they finally figure out what's really going on. So, we told his parents after Christmas. We waited until the holiday was done, and then we told his parents out there. And, the whole family, of course, his mom is such a positive, optimistic person. She's like, "I'm sure you're gonna be okay. I'm sure you're gonna be alright." And his sister, she knew right away. She knew right away because she worked in health and wellness, and she just said, "Mom, he is not gonna be okay. He is not gonna be okay." So, it was a very different kind of holiday for all of us. And it was kind of, and John, was trying to figure out what to do about work or people finding out about this in the industry that he was in. And he was offered a remote position, which was terrific. He could work at home on a special project. And that was probably one of the things that was most important for him, Crystal. I remember asking him shortly after we got this diagnosis. We've all heard about having these bucket lists, right? What are the things that you really want to do in your life before it ends? So I looked at him and I said, what is it? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What has been the dream that you have always had? Because this is the time, John, because in a year you may not be able to walk. We know you're not going to be in the same physical space that you are in now. And he looked at me and he just said, I just want to spend as much time with you and the boys, living as normally as I can, Rachel, for as long as I can.
Hmm.
And Crystal, that wouldn't have been my answer. I would have been like, you know what? I I want to go to I want to go on a worldwide I would have come up with something. I knew
Mhm.
that, but he was just that kind of simple guy. And one of the things that I learned through this process, and that I know going forward as I watch my parents age, his mom get older, his dad get older, is being able, if they are in a state of mind that that they're all here, to be able to honor the wishes that somebody has as they get toward these last years of their life, whether they're ill or not. If you can honor the wishes that they have, then try to do that. Um, because even though they may not be the same as yours, and even though it may be difficult, it's so important to be able for them to have some kind of control when everything else in their life feels so out of control. And I'm learning that as I walk with my parents aging, and as I said, John's parents as well. And that's what I was able to do for John, was to, we had the discussions about the feeding tube. We had the discussions about the breathing tube. 85% of ALS patients will get a feeding tube because it becomes way too difficult to swallow. The opportunity to choke presents itself quite often. Less than 10% will get the trach, because once you get a breathing tube, and some of you may already have experienced this with a loved one, the level of care changes. And of course, then they lose the ability to speak. So we had that conversation a few times and realized that we would do the one, but we would not do the other.
How old were your boys at this time?
So our boys, when John was diagnosed, um, John was 11 and Jake was 7. And then when he passed, Jake was 10 and John was 14. So we waited a year, and because John then at that time was more symptomatic, you could tell something was wrong with dad. His foot wasn't moving right and his left side was becoming weaker. And we brought them into the den one day, and we knew we were going to have to tell them. One of the reasons that we waited, Crystal, was also too, we knew the minute that we told the boys, the rest of their community would find out, right? And John and I had really taken that time that year to kind of get ourselves to the place where it wasn't normal. It was now part of our normal, but we knew that we had fortified ourselves in a way that we could withstand the tsunami of support that was going to be headed our way, right? Because sometimes that can happen. So we knew once we told the boys, because their friends we knew it would be a lot. But we called them in and told them that dad was sick and that he had this disease and his muscles would get weaker, and that was going to affect his ability to walk and to talk and to eat and to breathe. And that was about all that we shared with them. My husband couldn't, he was just way too emotional. That was the thing that wrecked him the most, Crystal, always, was the fact when he realized he was not going to be able to watch his boys grow up.
Mm.
It was devastating to him. And so he kind of it was kind of up to me to kind of handle this because he was just way too emotional. And our youngest son, Jake, had 3 questions. And Jake was about 8 at this time. And he's like, okay, mom, is dad going to be in a wheelchair? And I said, yes, dad will probably end up in a wheelchair. And he said, is dad going to get out of the wheelchair? And I said, probably not. Don't think so. And then he said, is dad going to get better? And, Crystal, all of us who have children, we tell our children not to lie, right? We tell them to always tell the truth, no matter what. And I realized in that moment, I was not going to lie to my children. I also didn't have to throw up on them either and give them every statistic I'd heard about ALS or anything else. But I just looked at both of the boys and I just said, he probably will not get better, but we are going to say our prayers every night and ask Jesus to heal him because we know that he can. We serve a God who can heal anybody of anything at any time. But in the meantime, we are going to take as good a care of dad as we possibly can. And with that, the conversation ended. There were no more questions. They headed out to see their friends. And the next thing I knew, the phone started blowing up. Hey, Rachel, it's Jill. Sam just came in and said that John told him his dad has something like ALS. You're kidding, right? This can't be true. And so then we found ourselves comforting our neighbors and the
Mm.
community because, they say good news travels fast, bad news travels faster. We
Mhm.
probably all had some experience with that. And so John and I then realized that, you know, we we were we were trying to, provide some source of support for them. And what it did is it just came back around to us as we needed more and more support. They were there. The community, the church, they were there.
That's beautiful. So it took about 3 years, sounds
Mhm.
like, for
Yeah.
it to finally claim him. So
Yes. Yes.
before we get to that part, I want to, if there's anybody listening that or watching that has ALS or they have a loved one that they're caring for, do you have any insight on how your husband was feeling and
Oh.
managing this? Like we've talked about your faith and how you were feeling, but did he share much of that with you?
I think as the disease progressed and he was less able to take care of himself, I think that for anyone who has to be cared for, it's difficult. And I will tell you too, him watching me become a caregiver was probably not the easiest thing either, Crystal. It was one of the things I've never considered myself a nurturer. And I think that was part of our relationship that really changed, right? Was being able to really care for John and I mean, physically. I will say that we he was such he was determined to do everything that he possibly could, right? I mean, we and John was a rule follower, probably much more so than I am. I'm a little bit more of a renegade, but whatever the doctor said, we followed it. And the way that they deal with ALS is that you have a clinic, usually somewhere near your home. They have an ALS clinic, which is a team. They put a team together. Your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, your respiratory therapist, your nutritionist, and then the doctor and a nurse. And you check in with them literally every 3 months. So they manage the progress of the disease. One of the missing components, which I believe maybe they've changed, but they didn't really address the mental health or the spiritual health piece of the
Mm,
individual. And I found that to be, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I found that to be somewhat, shocking actually, that because you think about getting a terminal diagnosis, what that does to your mental health. I mean, it can put you in in a very, very dark place. And it is not uncommon. I didn't know this at the time. I learned this later. It's not uncommon for some individuals who get this news, who go and look up everything on the internet and see what happens, to make a decision to, leave this world differently and not wait for the disease to take them out.
mhm,
And that's a whole different conversation that we could get into because we as believers have a have a different viewpoint on that, and
mhm,
at least for me, I know in my belief system, God decided when I was coming into this world and he'll decide when I leave. But there are some people who don't have the same perspective, correct?
right.
And actually, just recently, a couple of months ago, Eric Dane, the actor from Grey's Anatomy,
Mhm,
Dr. McSteamy. I never watched the show. I didn't really know. I mean, I knew he was an actor, and he came out with his diagnosis of ALS about a year ago, and they think that he had it a year before he disclosed to the public. Eric's gone. Eric died several weeks ago, leaving behind two young daughters. And I watched his documentary, or I guess in his last words, they did a
mhm.
taping
I
while he
watched it
could.
too.
Okay, so I'd be curious, what was your takeaway from that, Crystal, as you sat and listened to that?
Hey, real quick, we're going to pause here for a second. If what you've been hearing today is hitting close to home, I want you to know that your story matters too. Holy Wreckage is looking for guests who are ready to share their testimony. The real one, not the cleaned up version. The one that still has scars on it. If that's you, head to holywreckage.com or send me an email at crystal@holywreckage.com. Now let's get back into it. It was very sad that his perspective was there's nothing else after this. There was no hope. Nothing. Just black. Like
Lights out.
lights out, dark.
Lights out. I know.
Nothing.
And that's why I'm saying what I'm saying, because there are people when you don't have that, when you don't have what we have. And I'm sitting there and and Crystal, I'm just saying, did anybody try to talk to him? Was there anybody that maybe tried to change his mind? Would it have been so terrible for him to just say, "Oh, you know what? I want to hear more. I want to hear more." But when you look at all the trauma he endured in his life, there was nobody, I don't know that there was anybody that was pouring into him ever, anything of that, like people who we know in our life who've poured into us. But you are so right. I was just so sad that he didn't leave anything for his girls to hope for, like, you'll see me again, or, I can't wait for it. That was just, you said it, just profound sadness.
So we're at the point where, it's, I don't know how you want to share this part.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very difficult. It's a difficult situation. And I know, the story doesn't end there. So I guess, can you walk us through the last parts of his days and what life was like immediately after?
Yeah, I can. I remember the day that the doctor signed the hospice orders. The day that the doctor told us in May that John would not make it through the end of the year. Okay,
Mm,
that's that'll rock your world. That'll rock your world. And you're like,
yeah.
I'm sitting there going, you know that for sure? You know that for sure? Because,
I feel
I'm
like some
always,
people are like, I want to know when I die. But then, like, if you know, like, okay, you've got 8 months left,
yeah,
7 months left.
yeah,
I can't imagine the agony. I think I don't know a better word.
yeah.
Maybe there is a better word, but I can't think of one right now. It would be
No, that's,
agonizing to me.
yeah. And John is just trying to get the facts, right? John's like, okay, what does this mean? And the doctor says, I'm signing the hospice orders today. You don't have to go start hospice today, because my husband was of the belief system, and there are probably a lot of people too who believe hospice is a morphine drip and a hospital bed, and you're done. That's it, right? And one of the things that I've come to know is that hospice, there are a lot of people who go on hospice that stay there, do very well. They're okay. They're not dying tomorrow. I think a lot of people wait too long to utilize what hospice can offer.
Mm,
What I heard the doctor, he said, it will give you access to more help. I'm like, okay, more help is good. It was taking me up to 3 to 4 hours to shower John. We we would go through this whole process where I'd convert the laundry room into like a portable shower. I and heat it up and get the water going. And I set up this like portable camping shower in there, that would drain and do all these things. But it was a process to get him out of bed, get him in the plastic wheelchair, get him under. I mean, it was exhausting. And then to clean everything up, get him back into bed, change the linen, do all of that. So I'm hearing additional help and I'm thinking, okay, this is good. John's hearing, something else. And then the doctor said, and John's like, okay, end of the year, am I going to, are we talking, I'm going to get through the holidays or not, or whatever? the doctor he just kind of left it out there. So that was May. And John had already had the feeding tube. And so I had already gotten used to doing all of that. He wasn't doing a whole lot of by mouth at all. We went through that summer. We had moved his bedroom to downstairs. That had happened over a year or so before, so that he could look out the window and see the cul-de-sac and see the kids playing outside, and that was all good. He had his automatic wheelchair, so he could still manage that. It wasn't until probably the 1st of August that moving him, just I couldn't physically manage it. And the boys were still, they weren't big boys. But they were helpful. They did what they could. John had a catheter, he had a breathing machine. At that point, when school started again in August, I had looked to hire additional home health care because, to help with at night, getting John ready for bed, getting him, all of that took a really long time, because getting him in position, giving him his medicine, getting him relaxed and comfortable. Because remember, once I put him in position, he couldn't move. And we're just so used to being able to turn and move, and oh, I'm not no, I had to be able then to, I would let him sleep for a couple hours, and then I'd get up and go back downstairs and move him. I wasn't sleeping with him because I knew I would be too disruptive. But I remember, you know, the weekend before he passed, I kept thinking he was so, um, I just felt like he wasn't with us, right? I would look at him and go, "What are you looking at? Who can you see?" I'm this whole time thinking he's seeing the angels or he's seeing heaven. I wasn't sure what he was seeing, but I knew he was seeing something. He couldn't talk, he couldn't speak. And I kept thinking, okay, we're getting closer. But never having done this before, Crystal, I wasn't sure. So I remember that Monday, we had this terrific hospice nurse, Jim. He was as different could be. He was kind of had a hippie vibe to him. He wore a bandana. He had, rings and bracelets, and he was just the coolest guy. And John had gotten a shower that morning. The hospice aide had come in. We'd gotten him showered. It was exhausting. He kind of had a pale cast to him, and he was cranky. He was just really, really, really cranky. But we got him clean and good and settled. And Jim came by that afternoon. It must have been about 1:30 or 2. And, he checked on John and he goes, "Okay, Rachel." He said, we're John is entering the phase he's actively dying. Now, have you ever heard that term, Crystal? Yeah,
No.
I've never heard that term. I'm like, what what? What does actively dying mean? Because I'm like, is something going to start happening to his body, or things, is he going to, I didn't know. Is he going to foam at the mouth? Is his stomach going to blow?
Right.
I mean, his stuff, I didn't know. I'm like, I'm having visions of all kinds of things, the body doing stuff that it shouldn't be doing or something. And he goes, "No, Rachel," he goes, "what's going to happen is his organs will probably start to just, shut down, and you'll start to see some modeling in his feet and his hands, meaning they'll start to turn bluish, purple, or, the circulatory system is starting to have difficulty." And he's
Hmm.
on a breathing machine. So I'm like, "Okay, is he going to start gasping for it?" What, and Jim's like, "No, just your job is to just keep him comfortable," which is what you've been doing with the Dilaudid and all of the other things you've been giving him. So just keep him comfortable. And I go, "Well, okay, how long, what are we talking here? What's my time frame?" He goes, "Well, it could be a couple of days, it could be a week. We just kind of don't know." And I'm kind of like, "But you're the hospice nurse. You've seen this before. Can't you give me something more specific than that?" And here's the thing, Crystal, and if anybody's going through this, one of the things that didn't happen, nobody really talked to me about what that piece of this process should look like. Nobody, you often hear about families gathering at the bedside and, playing music and praying. And I hadn't gotten to that place. We hadn't had those discussions. I had never even, unfortunately, even talked to John about that. We had talked about a lot of other things, but the reality is I didn't realize that this was happening or going to happen right then. And I really hadn't gone there. So I'm just going to put that out there now. If there's anybody that, this may be, happening now, talk about it, think about it, because when it actually did happen, it was completely different. And I've only learned this in retrospect. All right. I didn't know any of this going in because once again, I hadn't had anybody in my family die like this. So Jim leaves. He says, "Just call me if you need me. Otherwise, I'll be back, day after next." And I said, "Okay." So he leaves. It's a little after 2. And, I've got all of John's meds set up. My dad's napping. My parents had come from Australia. They'd been living with me since that April, and we're now in September. And they had moved in and were there to help. My dad had started reading the Bible to John, and they had started in the New Testament. And it was always so interesting to, you know, John would just let my dad know through blinking his eyes or trying to move his arm, doing something to say, "I need you to back up and read this again or explain it to me." So it was always interesting to hear my dad explaining something in the Gospels, but they had moved through, they were actually had gotten to Romans. And so my dad was napping. I went in to check on John, and he was still, I just thought he was just napping. And then I just realized, I'm like, something's just a little different. And I wasn't sure what it was. And I just leaned in real closely just to kind of put my cheek against his, and I realized he is just really cold. I touched his hands. I'm like, "Yeah, he's cold." And I just whispered, thinking, his eye would open. It didn't. And it occurred to me, I'm like, he's he's gone. I think he's gone. So I called for my mom and I said, "Mom, could you come in here and just double check for me? Because I think John has left us." Well, she came in there and she just panicked. And the next thing I know, she's yelling, "James, James!" It's my dad. "James, get in here right now." And I'm like, "Okay, Mom, that wasn't really helpful." I could have
Yeah.
yelled for Dad, but because she was just scared. She was scared. And so my dad comes in and I'm standing by the bed and I go, "Dad, could you just verify for me? I don't think John's got a pulse. I think that he has left us." Well, my dad, being a military man, they were taught how to check on the battlefield or in combat, how to check for if someone is dead. I didn't know this. What they do, Crystal, is they lift up they lift up the eyelid. And if the eye rolls back into the head, that's how they know that person has
Oh,
passed. That way you don't have to check for a pulse or anything else. The eyes just rolled back into the head. And that's what happened. And I was so filled with relief that he wasn't suffering anymore, and he had been so kind to just slip. He just slipped right out. There wasn't any drama. He didn't make a big deal of it. I'm sorry. He just left. He just left. And my dad, I love him for this. I love him for this. My dad immediately holds his arms out and he starts praying. And I'm like, I go, Dad, I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm asking God to bring him back. He has raised people from the dead before, Rachel. He can do it again. And I will tell you, Crystal, in that moment, I was like, I want faith like that. I want to go even deeper. I want to go, I want what my dad has. I want to be that person. Not being crazy, not being wild, just saying, okay, Lord, you can bring him back. Give him back. Bring him back to us. It didn't happen. But I loved the fact that my dad was asking. I
That is
realized
so
that
beautiful.
I have more work to do in my faith development. We always do, right? But it was such a testimony. It was such a testimony. So then you go into, this is the part too that I've had people tell me since that, gosh, Rachel, did you sit with John for a while? Did you just, hang out with him? And I didn't know that any of that was even possible. Actually, Crystal, I didn't know that you could do things like that. The boys were still at school. And my first thought was, okay, well, my first thought was I have to call Jim. I have to get him back here because there's a whole procedure, right? When somebody dies at home. I didn't know what that was, but I knew he would know. I knew he would know. And then I had to figure out arrangements for the boys and somebody to pick them up and do whatever. So we got all of that done, and here comes Jim, because it was within an hour of him leaving that all of this transpired. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. So he came, and then he said, "All right, now you can call the funeral home. I'll call the coroners." All of those things that have to happen. And I never will forget, my sister-in-law was there, and she was all freaked out about all of the things. She doesn't have kids. She was all freaked out about, the kids in the neighborhood seeing a hearse pull up or any of that stuff. And she's just like, we got to get, da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, hold on. But they came and got him. The coroner came and got him. And I never will forget moving John from the bed. He was probably only 120 pounds. He was just skin and bones. And, you know, everything disconnected, the catheter, the feeding tube, the breathing machine. And we put him in the body bag and we zipped him up. And I remember just kissing his forehead and just saying, you just go be with Jesus. Just go be with Jesus. And they wheeled him out. And all of that happened. The kids were not home yet, so that was good. They did not see their dad. I made that decision. I don't regret it. They had seen him deteriorate for 3 years, and part of me just did not want that to be their last image of their dad. I mean, he just looked like he was sleeping, but there was something about that I just did not want for them. And when they did get home, I had them meet me in the basement And I just told them that their dad, I said, we've talked about daddy going to heaven. I said, he went to heaven today. And then Jake looked at me and he said, you mean dad died? I said, yeah, he did. And we just wept.
I want to cry right now. Oh my gosh.
So, it's one of those moments that just changes you. And like I said, I think my grief was more for these boys. It still is. Father's Day is the hardest. It's the hardest holiday for me. And because, like I said, John was just wrecked about the fact that he would not get to father his boys anymore or see them become the men that they are today.
How did that affect them?
Mm.
Losing your dad, watching your dad pass away over the course of a few years, and then him dying when you're a young, just starting out as a teenager, that wrecks you.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious, like, are they okay? How did that?
Well, they are, they are now. I will tell you the second book that I am working on is The Boys, the Bible, and the Battles, because the oldest, John, was 14, just starting high school. And I had no idea what the grief, what the hurt, what the loss was going to do to him. And he had started acting out before his father died, but I just thought it was just this impending loss. John chose the road of drugs to numb the pain. And so we spent the next 4, 5 years battling his addiction. And I
Mm.
knew nothing about drugs. I knew nothing about addiction. I knew nothing about treatment, nothing. My youngest, Jake, got addicted to sports. If it had a ball in it, Jake was all about it. And, Jake still had, I mean, he was 5th grade, 10 years old. Any of you that have kids know that they're still at that sweet spot. They're still those little people that will give you a hug, that will, curl up in bed when the thunderstorm's going on outside because they're still a little scared. And it has been it has been so revealing to me, because they've been working on this book with me. And now they are young men of 25 and 29 who can actually go back and think about what was going on then. And they don't have all the answers. There's a lot of, the word chaos has been used a lot. The word blur has been used a lot. So much of it that they knew what was going on and yet they couldn't process it. And what we know now in our world 17 years later, we know so much more about mental health, mental awareness, grief, trauma, the effects on kids, how they grieve differently than adults, and how grief in and of itself is something that we're constantly, it's constantly evolving, right? It changes. It never leaves us. So John is sober, he's working, he has 2 children. I'm a yaya, and Jake is working in Chicago, and both of them, dealt very differently with the same event. And I think that for the longest time, I didn't realize, Crystal, for the first 2 years, that one of their major fears was losing their other parent.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people forget that when kids are that little, that's a real fear, because if one can go, the other can go too. So there were just so many aspects of it that I was just clueless about. And then, of course, trying to get the right kind of help, that's a whole nother process too. And if anybody has ever had to do that, find the right counselor, find the right program. And I think that the schools probably today are much more aware and attuned and have resources. I think that our schools did the best they could for the boys. Um, I sent them to, a grief camp. I did all of the things that I thought were good, but I also know too, and if you have raised boys or raised girls, you know that they process and their emotional maturity comes at very different stages.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was another thing that I was dealing with because at 10 and 14, they're at 14 especially, they're supposed to be bonding with their dad. They're supposed to be pulling away from their mom. That's the norm. That's what's supposed to be happening. And I wasn't built to be their dad.
Right. Yeah, we can't, as much as we try, we cannot fill that space.
No, we can't. And
Mm.
we can't fix everything either.
No, there's no guidebook for all this, you know? We have a
True.
lot more resources now than we did then when this happened to you.
Yeah.
But I know for me, when you share finding help for your children, I've been in situations where I've needed to find help for my children, and it's not easy. It's such a grueling process because for one, the cost of it, and for second, finding the right one. It's hard enough for as an adult to find your own good therapist, and let alone find one for the child when they probably don't even want to go in the first place.
Correct. Yes. Yes. You're so right. And I'm hoping that's got a happy ending in there somewhere that you've been able to make the right fit.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Eventually it worked out and healing is underway. Yes.
Lovely. Oh, thank you, Lord.
Yes. Thank you, Lord. So you wrote a book called The Widow Chose Red. Tell me about that and why did you pick that title?
I picked that title because I wore red to John's celebration of life service. And at the time, remember John's been gone. It'll be 15 years in September. At that time, celebration of life wasn't even the thing it is now, Crystal. I was kind of ahead of the curve on a couple of things, and that was one of them. We were still in that mode of funerals and memorials, and everybody's, coming in black and it's very somber. And, you know, we didn't do celebrations of life like we do now, where it is a celebration of what that person brought into the world and what their legacy is. And it's more of a focus on all the good than maybe the horrible way in which they died or the terrible illness that took them. So for me, and because there were so many kids that came to this service. I mean, I had parents, reaching out going, is John going to be laid out in a coffin? I'm like, no, he was cremated. So you don't have to, because for a lot of families, this was a first time experience for them to be going to something like this. So, so I made sure that the boys spoke. They recited a poem. There are actually QR codes in the book that will take you to. It was recorded. I had the foresight to record it. Now we stream everything. We live stream. COVID changed the way we cover events like this. We videotape things. But I knew then that I wanted to have something for the boys that they could remember the stories and hear from others about their father. So I had the service recorded. I had the event later recorded. We had lunch at the church, and I had the boys pick out, what do you want? What do you think we should have for lunch? And of course, they said pizza. So we had pizza for hundreds because that's what they chose. So they were a big part of this. And so for me it was just red. Red signifies love, the color of love, the color of passion. It's also the color of fire, which the Holy Spirit in the book of Acts is is noted as a flame, right? As coming into the apostles, and that flame and that fire that lives, that supernatural power that we each have inside of us as the Holy Spirit, our advocate and our comforter, is there. So that is why red just spoke to me. And I'm not saying that I put a lot of thought into it, but I knew I wasn't wearing black. And so red seemed to be the next best color. I had a dress, and there we were. And the cover of the book is actually the photograph that was taken right before we headed out to the church on the morning of that celebration of life service. And the boys are both wearing a tie from their father.
Mm, I love that. That is beautiful. I know you also have a website, Spirited Prosperity. Tell our audience what they can find there.
Well, so spirited prosperity to me is all about inviting that Holy Spirit into every area of your life. Prosperity isn't just financial; it's a way of life for me, and mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of those come into play. And so, I developed spirited prosperity as a way to build a platform that would help me lend my confidence and support to others who may be going through some challenging times. And what I want to do through my writing and through my speaking is to help fortify the things that matter in your life, so that when you get to a place, and we all will, something, we're thrown a curveball out of the blue, that we have got something stored up inside of us that will help us navigate what's ahead, and that resilience can be built up inside of us. So it comes through fortification, and that comes for us as believers. It can be prayer, it can be meditation, it can be study, it can be fellowship, it can be prayer, it can be worship, all of those things, which I think are so important. But for me, it also means community. And I I had community supporting me, but I didn't know another widow. I didn't know anybody else who'd been widowed at 49. I didn't know any single moms. I knew women who were divorced that were raising their kids with their exes, but now we live in a digital world where we can connect with others, and through platforms like yours, where people can get connected and can hear stories, and realize that they are not doing this alone. They don't have to do this alone. And but that didn't exist for me back then. That was kind of where spirited prosperity, that was kind of how it developed, and how it's grown. I just want it to be a resource and a place of comfort and fortification for others.
I love that. We go through trials, but it's not wasted, you know?
Yeah.
And so I really thank you for allowing the Lord to work in your life so that you can take this experience and help others through it. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. Please reach out to Rachel if you need some support walking through this journey. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Rachel.
Oh, Crystal, thank you. It has been a blessing to share with you. Just Godspeed to you on this journey as you are building Holy Wreckage, because I know that it is reaching people who need support. So thank you for what you're doing, and I just pray it will just continue to be a blessing to others.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And that's a wrap. Thanks for being here for Holy Wreckage, where we tell the truth about pain, healing, and the God who still redeems the mess. If this episode hit home, don't just move on. Subscribe, like, and follow so you don't miss what's next. And share it with someone who needs hope. For more faith-based tools, support, and resources to help you walk through your own wreckage, visit holywreckage.com/resources. Until next time, remember this: your story isn't too far gone for God. It's not too broken or too messy. He still restores, he still rebuilds, and he's not done yet.